maybe Byron, you could start by just giving us a quick run through of who you are, where you're based,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you do, and how long you've been in business. I think might be
Mm,
might be a good starting point.
yeah, definitely. So my name's Byron, obviously, and I run a performance digital marketing agency, and we've been in business now for around 9 years, I think. I think we'll be coming up to our ninth year in January next year. And typically, as an agency, we've focused on search optimization, Google Ads, and what I call as performance websites. So not your cookie cutter templatized style websites, but very lead gen, performance driven web development. So those are really our core areas. And over the last 12 months, my agency has gone through a process of niching down, and our niche has been focused on lawyers in that regard. So we've really been looking at our offer across all of that. And I guess that's probably going to form some of our conversations today, John, in terms of where I'm going next year with some of that, based on
Yeah,
where I've been for the last 9 years. So,
yeah. So I think just to give some context, I know going back a little ways, not so much at the moment, but certainly a little ways. You've been operating as a generalist, right? Would be
mm,
fair to say. So by that I mean you're providing those three services that you mentioned, but operating in different industries. And
hmm
I know, given that we communicate frequently, that that's presented some challenges which have become
absolutely.
more and more apparent. I probably over the last 12 months.
Mm,
Maybe you could talk about that because I think this is a fair um, topic of conversation. It's certainly a common one. A lot of SEO consultants go through this where they're not saying yes to everything, even if they're only providing a set number of services like you've been. But the challenges that you face operating as a generalist, essentially, okay, we've got 15, let's say 15 or 20 different clients, all in different industries. Now, I talk about
yep.
this a lot with those steep learning curves. You've got to learn
hmm
keywords, competition, terminology, pricing, all of that, all of those challenges that are presented. Maybe you could talk about what you've experienced and how that's had an impact on your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're spot on. I started off very much as a generalist. I think when you're starting out, it's very much, you're happy just to get work and start to get some larger retainers and so forth. And you potentially take on projects and you kind of learn some of your chops and your skill sets as you go through. So I definitely think that, I guess being a generalist is where I picked up some of my skills and so forth. But I think in the early days, I was much more open to diving into like unknown territory. Whereas these days, as my like business knowledge has improved, my business sense, and overall looking at how I get out of operations and move more towards marketing and sales, you start to say, well, how can I create a process around something that we've never done or never seen before? I could take on a client today selling cat collars or something like that. At the end of the day, I have the experience and I have a team that could assist with that, but we don't have any proven processes. We don't have any proven campaigns or experience in that. So there's a lot of unknowns. And I always say that when you're learning, you're not earning. Basically, learning and being in that state of learning is just not a
Mm.
good position to earn a lot of money and feel like you're kind of in control with your business. So it's funny. It's funny because you always think that you can do this sort of stuff. I mean, I know that I've said things along the way to you, John, that I can do SEO for $500, and then you do it for a while and you realize that, hey,
Yeah,
actually, I can't do it for that price.
yeah.
Or
Well, you can't
I
do
don't
it
know.
well. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you can't do it well. And, as a generalist, you're like, I can operate as a generalist. But what you don't realize is that there's actually components of that where you're not doing things well. Like you said, once you're in a conversation for a longer period of time, if you're speaking to your niche consistently, you start to identify problems and you
Mm.
start to develop a lot more confidence when you're speaking to prospects to say, do you want 10 leads? Oh, cool. I can get you 10 leads in the first 30 days if that's what
Yeah,
you want because I've seen it. I've seen it.
yeah.
So
Yeah, there are
yeah,
so many upsides to niching down and working as a specialist. And I know,
yeah,
going back a number of years, when we first had this conversation, I don't think
mm,
you were real keen on the idea. And I
mm,
have to admit, when I first started looking into niching down, because it's a conversation that seemingly comes up a lot in this space,
mm,
and let's face it, it's become a bit of a catchphrase now. It's a bit of a soundbite,
definitely.
right?
Yeah,
Niche
yeah,
down, operate as a specialist, productize your service offering,
yeah,
and
yeah,
the people that and it can be easy to become to ignore that and think, okay, well, that
mm,
sounds all well and good, but
yep,
and I know for me, again, just going back, I was always against the idea of niching down, and I think the biggest reason for me was scarcity, a fear
mm,
of saying no,
correct.
potentially missing out on work.
Mm,
And I
correct.
and I remember having a conversation with you one time, and I said, I'm not really bothered. I've got, it doesn't. I think it went along the lines of, it doesn't matter to me if they're selling trampolines or it's a medical center. My processes don't really change that much
Mm,
in terms of what I do. In terms of SEO, what I do with SEO, and
yep.
that's fair to some extent, but it's certainly not true in many other areas, like
Mm,
you just said then, having to learn the terminology, having to understand the client's pain points,
mm,
keyword research, the type of content that might be required,
yep.
competitor research. There's just so many things that come into play when you're operating as a generalist that
Mm,
slow you down. And again, I talk
correct.
about those steep learning curves.
Yeah, yeah.
You've obviously changed the way you think about it. I know it took me a long time, but
Mm,
once I saw the upside, once I realized, hey, wait a minute,
mm,
and again, I talk about this in training,
yep.
thinking about an SEO campaign like an assembly line,
Mm,
knowing that, or even just baking a cake. I use these set
mm,
ingredients every single time. The process
yep.
doesn't change, and this is the end result. And this is going
Mm,
to be the end result every single time. And that plays
yep.
into forecasting, which is what you just said,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I
Absolutely.
know with confidence that I'll get
Yeah,
these
yeah.
outcomes.
Mm. And I think that's the thing at the end of the day. I mean, you touched on a few things there. One, and I think it was really just this morning on LinkedIn that I was watching something where they talked about, we should be aligned towards selling the outcome, especially if we want to get higher retainers and so forth. Well,
Mm,
what separates us from any other agency out there is our ability to say confidently that we can get a certain outcome if they use our service. And I think if you're a generalist, it's very hard for you to determine the outcome. You may have the skill set to go and do it, and you may still be able to get results, but you have no way of foreseeing it until you're actually in the trenches trying to do it. And I think many
mm,
agencies would have taken stuff on saying, cool, I can get results here. Then they go, oh, hang on a second. Actually, this is more challenging than I thought. And now I'm losing even more time because the results are not there. So, I think, we've spoken about guarantees and so forth. Everyone in the industry says like a guarantee is a bad thing. Well, I think a guarantee can actually be a very good thing as long as you're doing repeatable work that you know that you can get a certain outcome, and you can do that 99% of the time. Then I think you're in a very strong position there, to move forward. And I think that's a thing you mentioned there as well about fear of missing out. And I would think that that's absolutely factored into my decisions along the way. This fear of missing out. I don't want to, lose other leads that I could potentially get and so forth. But actually, what you should be more worried about is fear of not attracting the people that you want to actually bring towards
yeah,
you.
that's such a good point.
Yeah, that's the thing that you should fear.
Mm,
Fear of having an agency that saturates your time and
mm,
makes you work all weekend. That's what you should fear. Don't fear the kind of productized business where you're speaking to the same kind of customers consistently. That's actually a good thing. And I mentioned it to you the other day, John. It's funny when you say that I want to speak, because originally I wanted to speak to e-commerce, and I said, okay, I want to speak to e-com. we changed some of our advertising, we changed some of our marketing. All of a sudden, I'm speaking to ecom, all through COVID and so forth. I'm
Yeah.
speaking to ecom. And, fortunately, ecom was a pretty good place to be throughout COVID. It was a very good place to be. And, but ecom's also very challenging. It's very seasonal. It's suffers from product margin related issues. Even if you make someone 100,000, there's not necessarily a lot
And
of
also
money left
competition
over.
too, I would
Yeah.
assume, because you can go to
Oh,
Amazon and
definitely.
buy just about anything for half the
Correct.
price.
Correct. Plus, like COVID, people that lost their jobs or did different things, they all went into e-com. So you got a lot of these startup e-coms just popping up, and people go, "I can create a
Yeah.
Shopify store,"
Yeah.
but marketing it is a different beast.
Mm.
So in the end, we said, okay, e-com, that's not really where we want to be right now. We looked again at what kind of niche we were going to focus on, and we decided that lawyers was going to be the ideal position. And now we've again changed some of our marketing, and we're now having more of those conversations. So I just think that if you've said it before in the past too, if you speak to everybody, you speak to nobody basically. And I think that
Yeah.
when you do dial in who you're speaking to, naturally you start to pull those conversations towards you in some way, shape, or form. So
Isn't it funny how you don't see these things until you have that moment where, you said it recently, you said, I can finally see the light. And I thought, there are just so many upsides to niching down.
Correct.
There's a few things that you touched on then. Operating as a generalist, you're just creating a customer support business in many ways because of the sheer amount of noise that is created when you're trying to, when you're saying yes to everyone. And it just makes building out, it's just building out processes becomes almost impossible. And if you try, it becomes really chaotic.
Correct. And I would say on that as well is that, often when you're a generalist, when it comes to the decision of hiring, you're like, I need to hire John Romaine version 2. I need to hire Byron Trzeciak version 2. I need somebody that has my knowledge and experience because I don't have a system that can bring on this wide variety of clients that I'm actually dealing with here. So then hiring becomes even more challenging because you're trying to hunt for a diamond in the rough, so to speak, to bring someone on and to be able to execute these strategies. Because at the end of the day, if you take on work that you have no experience with, you need that strategy component, and strategy needs somebody with a bigger picture and more awareness to be able to drive that. And that's something that's challenging to get from an offshore team,
I think, when you're operating as a generalist, you're going to have each of these, micro steps within your tasks and deliverables where there are, these sticking points where your staff are like, oh, I'm not quite sure what to do here. I've got to go back and see Byron or ask Byron, as opposed to specializing where you can just productize your service offering. You've got dedicated SOPs and checklists. We've spoken at length about this, building out your agency like McDonald's. This is what you get.
Correct.
This is how much it costs. And this is how we prepare it. And this is why, you walk into McDonald's and they've got a 12-year-old serving the food, yet they're making millions of dollars because they've dialed in those processes. Those processes have to be repeatable so that you can escape fulfillment. But two other things that you touched on there, offering a guarantee, and I know that would raise quite a few eyebrows in the SEO space, but I think when you niche down and specialize and become an expert in your chosen field or industry, let's say, then that guarantee becomes more of an option. I think it becomes more feasible, not so much around rankings, but certainly around revenue. Okay, because you be able to forecast with more confidence. I don't know. I mean, we've spoken a few times about guarantees. Always been a little bit reluctant to sort of consider that. But I think, given that the direction you're heading in at the moment, I think a guarantee is definitely something you could consider, and that's a pretty strong and attractive offer. There's a lot of incentive there for someone to want to work with you. Okay, we're going to work with these guys, 12-month contract. If it doesn't work, we get our money back. If you're operating as a generalist, the outcome is unknown because there's just so many bits and pieces as part of that process that you're not familiar with. And the last point that you raised there was marketing. You know, how on earth are you going to promote your agency, your SEO agency, if you don't know who you're targeting? It makes marketing almost impossible. You're just shouting,
Correct.
you're shouting at everyone. We're just another
Correct.
SEO agency, the same as everyone else, as opposed to, we're an SEO agency that specialize, we work solely with medical negligence lawyers or family lawyers or roofing contractors or solar contractors. I mean, that's perfect because your marketing spend is used effectively. There's less waste. I guess it's comparable to running around with a shotgun versus being a sniper. And also sales, right? It's strong positioning in terms of sales. You get a lawyer on a call and you're talking their language and you can demonstrate that you've worked with other agencies and these are the results. That's pretty strong positioning, and you're going to win that campaign each and every time.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think that, I guess one of the points you touched on there about, having a niche. You can be a generalist agency. We see them here in Australia. I'm not going to mention any on this particular call, but there's generalist agencies out there that have a large number of employees. Why do they have a large number of employees? Because they need to have the intelligence to some degree in their team to be able to manage all those different campaigns and so forth. So, I mean, if your goal as an agency owner is to have 100-man team and that's what you want to go and do, then perhaps being in that general space is for you. But for me, that's not where I want to be. I would prefer to be a highly lean, a smaller team, let's say a 10-man team or something like that, and be scaling with very repeatable business, so that I don't have to have a 50 to 100 person agency down the track, So I think being a generalist is possible, but like you say, you get a much greater mix of leads and clients coming on board that you just need a huge team to be able to manage that. So that's the big problem. And I think if you're like me and, I kind of set out on my journey to have somewhat of a lifestyle business for some reason, in some way, shape or form. I felt that I could work from anywhere in the world at any time that I wanted to work and still get more money than what I was making in my previous corporate role, So now the way I look at it, I'm like, well, I don't want to lose focus around some of that. So my goals are really about how I make something highly scalable, high profit margins that I don't need to be in like every single minute of the day. I don't want to, if you said, oh, Byron, you can earn $10 million, but you're going to have to work 80 hours every week, then I'd say that's not for me. That's not what I'm looking for. But if you said like earn 10 million and, you only have to work 10 hours a week or something like that, I'm like, cool, let me take that option.
Well, even if it was less money, you can earn $1 million and you don't have to work at all. I'll take that all day
100%.
long.
Correct. And even looking at your own existing agency and say, well, right now, let's say I've got 30% profit margins. If I get to 60% profit margins, I don't even need new clients and so forth. The amount of money we're all earning per month actually means very little. It's actually how much is staying in our bank accounts. That's actually the more ideal number. So we should be focusing on that. So
I spoke about that recently, focusing on profit margins, not revenue, because it's easy. You see a lot of people, especially in our space, SEO consultants, we're doing $3 million a year. Well, how much of that are you actually keeping? That's what matters. But there's a couple of things that you touched on there. It's interesting timing, actually, because I was looking around at a number of large scale agencies last night and one that popped up, 200 staff. And I thought, holy shit, I couldn't imagine how noisy that must be and the amount of stress involved. Even just organizing rosters and sick days and annual leave and wages. And I thought, man, that would, for me, be a nightmare. 200 staff and 1,000 clients. And I thought and this was something that you mentioned recently, right? The difference between, let's say, a GP versus a specialist. A GP might be making, I don't know, $150 an hour. You go and see a specialist, they're making $500, $1,000 an hour. So the earning potential there for the same amount of input is much greater. And this maybe touches back on the point that you just made around volume, right? If you've got if you're doing $5 million a year as an agency and you've got 100 staff, well then, okay, that's not bad, but it would certainly be a lot better if you're doing 5 million, you've got 10 staff. And I think that's,
Definitely.
you know, and I talk again, we've had this conversation before, simplifying and, you know, working towards reduction, you know, subtraction as opposed to addition. It can be really easy to keep service stacking and adding new things, and oh shit, we need to hire someone to do this now, and you end up with creating this thing that you no longer enjoy, which is, you know, fairly typical for most that are working in the SEO space. So just to bring it back on, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just in terms of offer and so forth there, I think it's very easy to add more and more. Like, I need to make my offer more impressive so that I don't look the same as every other SEO agency. But let's say, you know, I was using this example today. There was a point where Elon Musk, he says, I'm going to launch rockets into the sky, and then I'm going to land them back down on the launch pad. And everybody said to this guy's mad. Like, he's completely crazy. That's never going to happen, you know? But he took it away. He figured out all the problems, and now he's got it to the point where he can actually do that. So the way I would look at it in your business is, let's say you're doing SEO. If you can somehow guarantee some kind of outcome within a fixed period of time, and the way that you do that is say, like, okay, well, if rather than deploying 100 articles over the next 12 months, can I deliver 100 articles in 30 days?
Yeah.
At a high quality, not a spammy quality, but at a high quality with a very strong product, then I think you're in a position there where that is something that other agencies are not doing, but you're not expanding your offering. You're making your existing offer more efficient and more enticing because of the scale you can put behind it. And that's what I think everyone should be looking at, rather than biting off new things every single day and doing 100 different service offerings and so forth. Have a think how you can deliver things like an exceptionally high level and do it faster, better, stronger, you know, more in depth than anybody else. So
yeah, that there's some really great points there, and I think any time where you can, and this is something that I think a lot of SEO consultants get into the habit of doing. I know I certainly did when I first started, was that they just do what everyone else does because that's what everyone else is doing. And you can get stuck in that cycle without actually questioning why you're actually doing things a certain way. You know, and I've spent a great deal of time over the last couple of years thinking, okay, well, why am I doing it this way? Is there a better way to do it? And it's funny, once you start asking those questions, you start finding much more efficient and effective solutions. You know, and like you just said, this probably touches on disrupting the industry somewhat. If you can reshape and improve your offering to the point where other agencies look at it and go, holy shit, why aren't we doing this? Then you can have an enormous impact. Well, they'd want to keep quiet about it because that's your USP, right? But it's that whole 1 minute mile thing, right? No, that will never work. No one's going to run a mile in a minute, and then somebody does it, and then 2 weeks later, 15 other people have done it.
Correct.
But
yeah, I think it's a funny thing, because I think that, you know, 10 from your group, including myself, John, we could get on a call today and sell SEO. And we'll be saying, well, it's not an instantaneous thing. It's going to take, you know, X amount of time for you to start seeing results and all that kind of stuff. You know, I'm very much interested in taking that latency period and somehow reshaping it to the point where, and obviously these are hard things to deal with. You know, like if you want to deploy 100 articles in 30 days, that's a lot of problems there that you've got to solve. You know, you have to break that down, split it all apart, go, okay, where are we losing all this time? What are the problems when we actually deliver the solution? How do we get the writing team to be able to do these sort of things? So I'm not saying any of this stuff is easy, but if you do manage to crack it, then again, you have fewer services and you've got one service offering that is incredibly enticing. And maybe you get to the point where, you know, you have two offerings or something, you know, one we do in 6 months, or one we do in 3 months, and one we do in 1 month or something, you know. So Yeah, I think that's the mindset we should be looking at, is how to really
Mm.
like provide scale within our existing offering than trying to bite off
That's the
more
thing.
than
I
we can
mean,
chew.
yeah, it's a narrative around, work less,
Yeah,
make more, which is
correct.
something that seems to be coming up everywhere lately.
Definitely.
Just to bring it sort of back on topic,
Hmm.
what were some of the challenges that you faced? Maybe give me the top three challenges that you faced prior to making the decision to niche down and specialize, that sort of led you
Hmm.
to changing your views and moving in a different direction. What were some of the biggest
Hmm.
challenges that you faced?
I think first and foremost would be the variety in clients and so forth. While we have very long retentions, you were still taking on customers not fully knowing, you know, or having any experience of that specific industry. So I back my own experience, I back my team's skill set. But again, when you look at a website and from the outside, you go, okay, well, this could convert okay, or perhaps this has got enough volume for me to go on target. And then you get into it and you realize, like, actually, there's not much volume here. And therefore, to get those leads or the number of leads that customer wanted is actually very challenging.
Hmm.
Or, you know, um, I think this website will convert, and then you get in
Yeah.
there, and then you realize that it doesn't convert, and then you still got the pressure. The client still has the expectations that you're going to get results for them. So it just creates a whole lot of problems around being confident with who you bring on board, and like you said, it just creates a wealth of noise around that to be able to deal with it. And I think at that point, then you look at your staff and so forth and say, well, do my staff have the experience to handle this degree of noise? We have an offshore team as part of Pixel Rush, but there's certain tasks that offshore is very good for. But when they're in an unknown land, then that's obviously a very, very challenging element as well. So it just means no matter how much you've tried to build out your conveyor belt, you're constantly getting sucked into areas of your business where you just don't want to be at the end of the day. And yeah, that's just a challenging position to be in. You just cannot get it to the point. And I will say here on this call, if you're doing that, if you're dealing with multiple industries, plus like me, you also had SEO, Google Ads, web design, it is very, very challenging to get to the point where you're just not in the operational side whatsoever. And I would say that the more you get sucked back into the operational side, the more your sales and marketing takes a hit in some way, shape, or form. And realistically, that's where a lot of us should actually be positioned. So, yeah, um, hiring is a challenge. The noise that it generates is definitely a challenge. And then I think in terms of retention as well, I mean, like I said, our retention rate's always been very good. I've never considered that to be a problem in comparison to other agencies that I've spoken to. But if you take someone on unknown and it doesn't work out, then it does result in churn. And obviously, you've got these pressures, these ebbs and flows
Mm.
in your sales every single month. And you say, okay, cool, I can't hire anybody now, or I can't spend $4,000 on my Facebook ads this month because it's not there, or I can't see the consistency in my cash flow to be able to go and do some of these things. So I think it just creates a whole ripple effect of different issues within your agency.
Yeah, there's as you're speaking, it just makes me realize just how much it has a flow on effect into every area of your agency. It's like dropping a
Mm,
stone into a pond, it just that ripple effect.
correct.
Okay, now it's impacting our speed and implementation, which it has a flow on
Mm,
effect and introduces difficulties with experience and skill sets within our team. And that takes me away from sales and marketing. And
mm,
it's just, yeah, it really isn't great. And it's not until,
mm,
again, it's not like I said at the beginning of this call, it's not until you have that moment where you think, okay, wait, there's a
mm,
much better way of doing this. So with all of
correct.
those challenges, you've made some considerable changes, probably over the last 6 months, would you say?
Yeah,
Did you
probably
have
like 6 to 8, I think, that we started to make the changes.
what was the defining moment when you thought, okay, this doesn't make sense what I'm doing. I'm going to niche down and specialize.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's some degree of burnout to some degree. I think that every agency owner gets to a point where they feel burnt out. I often give the example, I think I've said it to you, John, about agency owner that I was speaking to, and he was happy to invest, 10K into Bitcoin. And I said, well, why wouldn't you consider investing 10K into your agency? And I think it was his opinion that the 10K would just result in a lot more work and a lot more noise for him. Whereas the 10K going into Bitcoin, he doesn't necessarily have to do anything. He just needs to watch whether it goes up or whether it goes down, So for him, even the chance of completely losing all of that money to Bitcoin was still more enticing than putting it into his agency. And I thought that was quite an eye-opener to me. I'm like, it's very interesting, a lot of agency owners don't want to put their foot on the pedal because they do know that it's going to be it's going to create more noise for them in their life, So yeah, I think to some degree it was you just can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result in some way, shape, or form. Obviously speaking to you, John, speaking to some other coaches and mentors, they'd obviously been talking about niching for many years. I think as well, we looked across our client base and we said, well, which ones are the ones that we enjoy working with, but which ones do we feel are also very suited to our service? And I think that lawyers is still something that's very prominent in Google. It's still, it's not like e-commerce. Actually interesting because I just did a quick review of different accounts and so forth we had. And for e-com, Google Organic made up around 10 to 15% of the overall traffic profile. And whereas when I looked at lawyers and so forth, Google Organic and Google Ads made up almost 88% of their overall traffic channel.
Yeah.
And I think that just shows the difference in that some niches now are actually moving towards, social. People are getting picked off in the social land, and they're not filtering through to Google as much. So we kind of looked and said, well, which one do we feel is something that is really aligned with what we're already doing, and that we feel that we can get results very, very easily. And so lawyers, that was the area that we really wanted to focus on. And yeah, I think since that point, we did look at recreating our offer, which still included Google Ads, and it still included SEO, and it still included things like performance websites and those sort of areas. But the problem I found now, once I got to sales and marketing, is that I didn't really know what I was selling anymore. I get to the point where I was like, what am I actually selling here? And I'm just throwing a lot of options at people and saying, is this a good
choose your own
fit for it?
adventure?
Correct. And the more that I've kind of been in sales, the more I realize that people are pretty overwhelmed with how many decisions they're making every day. People are making so many different decisions. You've got your phone buzzing, you've got Slack buzzing, you've got Skype buzzing, somebody wants a call with you here. Email. Your wife's asking whether you're going to pick up milk and put it in the fridge this afternoon. And it's like, these are a lot of decisions. So to get someone on a call and try to qualify or highlight like what they're going to be getting in the offer, it's quite difficult when you're highlighting all these different elements. So that's one thing now that over the next 12 months I'm looking like, how do I productize even further here and say that it will be a niche plus a channel and something that I feel like can get results in a specific period of time. And hopefully I'll get to the point where I can wrap that very big guarantee around it as well, and be very confident that, we're not going to be refunding money every single month in that regard. So that's really where I want to go with it. And I think that when you've got these three different services, you said it best, John, you need three different sets of people, and
processes.
Correct. You need the processes as well. And, we've spent a lot of time, we use Guru for our processes, and we've done Loom videos for a whole heap of different things, like a full-blown wiki in there, but then the processes become out of date, then the business changes, and then again, and again, you look at these things and say, are they simplified to a point where, I could get my mum to be able to implement these for me, like if you can get to the point where it's that simplified and you can get a Filipino or somebody without much technical knowledge to be able to implement this and get a certain outcome, then I feel that's the position where you're at, something that's got a huge amount of scale for you and something that you can really move forward with. So So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. We're not quite where we want to be just yet. We're definitely moving towards it. So
So it sounds to me like the challenges faced were numerous. The complexities around your processes and operations, the learning curves involved with having to understand different industries, the uncertainties around outcome. I mean, there's probably a number of different things I've missed there, but it sounds like the challenges were
yep.
numerous. A couple of things that you touched on there, and this is something that I hear a lot. I hear this all the time. You know, I don't have I don't have time to do your training, John. I'm so busy. I'm maxed out. And I remember you said something a couple of months ago. Well,
Yep.
no, you're not maxed out. You've just got shit processes.
Mm.
Because you've got 10
100%.
clients and you're telling me you're maxed out. I mean, I spoke to an SEO consultant not too long ago. Had 3 clients. Man, I don't have time. I'm absolutely under the pump. And I thought, 3 clients?
Correct.
What on earth is going on?
I think on that, that's a great comment, because I often have people tell me they haven't got time, and I said, if you haven't got time, you basically need to put down the tools today. You just need to put them down, step away from the computer, step away from everything that you're doing. And I've talked a lot this year about having this time that's distraction free and so forth, where you're not looking at your email, you're not looking at different areas. And some of these things in your business, they aren't easy to transition, but if you don't do it, then you'll always be in this reactive state. And I remember in computer security and so forth, when I did that before my current agency, you could be in this very reactive state, trying to patch different workstations and close all these holes and so forth. What you really need to identify is, what's the critical thing here? What is the flag that some hacker is trying to capture? Is it our main database that has all of our emails and credit card details and so forth? Is that what they're going to go after? Cool. Let's be proactive rather than reactive, and actually try to secure that and do a really good job of that before we go chasing off like after all of these other butterflies. We're never going to keep up with that stuff. And that's where I think a lot of agencies are in this state. They're never going to get to a point where you're proactive unless you put down the tools and actually
I spoke about that in one of my recent videos. I referred to it as service debt. It's comparable. It's a little bit different because, well, the point is, each and every time you say yes to something, you're creating service debt, and you eventually get to a point where you're unable to reduce that debt and you become overwhelmed. But working in a reactive state is pretty common, and that's where you essentially end up running around putting out fires. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely true. And I think you've been doing this over the last couple of months. Set aside one day, even if it's just one day, to work on the business, not in it. And that was something that I used to hate hearing, because it's become a bit of a cliche. Work on the business, not in it. It's so true. If you don't take the time to do that, then you're going to be caught in fulfillment forever. And that leads to a place that I've been twice now, burnout. And that's why most agency owners fail, or just sell out, or get out of the industry completely, because they burn out. But another thing that you touched on there, which I think was quite interesting, was that you reviewed your existing operations and service offerings, right? And you said, okay, well, this is what fits our service offering. And I think that was a really smart move, because the chances are, and this is what I scribbled in my notes here in front of me, I've got perhaps 20% of the clients bringing in 80% of the revenue. Right? And I know that, I remember you said to me, I've got this legal client, they're paying, can I say?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, they're paying $8,000 a month, right? SEO. Why don't I just go and get 10 more of these types of clients? And I said, exactly, Byron, exactly. Instead of having all of this other noise where, you've got a client paying $1,200, another one paying $1,500, and there's so much more work involved. And not only that, the friction and resistance around cost. And this all comes back to, figuring out who your ideal clients are. But I think that reviewing what you did there was a smart move. It could have been easy to just pick something and say, okay, this looks good. But being smart about it, being strategic.
I was just going to say on that too, in terms of profit margins and so forth, if you're agency owner out there. I think when we got started, John, we're like, I'm going to charge 10 hours. It's going to be $150. And like, I didn't really have any operational overheads at that point. Oh, okay, cool. I'm paying for SEMrush, but it's split up against, five clients or something at the time. You didn't really have a lot of costs. So it's very, very high. It's highly profitable at this point. But if you want to get out of that, you can't just be charging 10 times 150, in my opinion. You have to be charging the amount that you would like in order to hire the team you feel you need to put in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise you're just going to get into this area where you're completely stuck. And then once you've hired and you develop more and more costs, then trust me, to understand your degree of profitability becomes infinitely more harder. Like, it's far more challenging. I think there's probably a lot of agencies out there that are offering certain services, and they don't even know if they're going to be profitable or not. They don't know if they're going to be profitable, and they're selling them away in a client that they don't understand whether they're actually going to get results in a specific period of time. They have no idea. And that's a bad place to be, because let's say, for example, I charge $3K for a lawyer to do SEO, and they want to rank for Family Lawyer Melbourne, for example. $3K per month is not going to cut it to get for that particular term. It may not even cut it to get some of the more basic service-driven page or location-driven pages. You might struggle on a whole heap of different things. And if you're also putting in a lot of effort, and that effort's probably going to go up the longer it takes to get results, you're going to get to the point where it's not even profitable, and you ask yourself, why am I even doing this? So I would say a lot of agency owners, they don't even know their profit margins, and it only gets worse further down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely something I've seen. I think what you said then, and this is true for many SEO consultants, especially freelancers, and this is a mistake, huge mistake that I made. They charge based upon what they need to make personally, as opposed to taking into account, like, large scale agencies charged based upon, okay, we've got overheads, we've got rent, we've got a physical location, we've got insurance, we've got wages, we've got staff, we've got operational costs, we've got tax, we've got all of these other things. And if we don't charge in line with that, then we're gone, we're out of business. And and this is where, I speak to let's say a freelancer, how much? I just charged, $2,000. That's all well and good, because you can live off that personally, but you're not going to build a business around it.
Correct.
But yeah, okay. So let's move towards wrapping it up. Give me some really definitive steps or actions that you're going to implement, and I know you're still working your way through this, that might give the listeners a better understanding of exactly how you intend to solve these problems and what you're going to actually do in terms of implementation and execution.
Yeah, definitely. So I think at this point, we're still going to continue to offer the 3 different services that we have in place. At least our existing arrangement with customers is going to remain the same. And what we're going to start off is looking at one highly productized offering. We really want to get to the point where we feel we can scale up, whether it's 0 orders or 10,000 orders. It should feel basically the same. And for us, obviously, we're going to look at Google Ads first, but then I think that an agency can definitely have multiple productized offerings. There's no reason why you couldn't. The problem is that everybody tries to say that, well, I'm offering SEO and I'm offering Google Ads. It's different to offering it to having 2 or 3 or 4 productized service offerings. For example, I did speak to someone the other day, and he had a productized offering around cold email, and he had actually so much free time that he's like, well, now with the money, I can now either invest it in sales and marketing, or I may go and invest in other emails or do other areas and offer the same kind of model, but maybe rather than cold email, maybe they're going to do SEO, or maybe they're going to do Facebook ads or Instagram. So I think we just need to get into this mindset of, like, it has to be productized. I have to have tested it. And really, you want to get to the point where it's not taking any of your time. If you can say that it's less than 5% of my time to bring on a customer, or ideally 0% of my time to bring on a customer, then that's the way that you're going to move forward. And, right now we'll focus on Google Ads plus landing pages, but then I think that SEO is a different beast, and all these problems are completely solvable as well. Like I said, how can we deploy 100 links in 30 days or something? That's probably a bad example because Google might not like that kind of thing. But how can we
100 articles? Yeah.
Yeah, 100 articles are great. Or how can we deploy all the services and subservice pages and any location-specific pages in 30 days? And I'd say 30 days is just a number. It's my, again, Elon Musk, launching and landing rockets scenario where you have to think outside the box and create a more audacious scenario to change your mindset and thinking that these areas are achievable. Have a look at SEO. And how can you start to, make many different areas far more efficient? Strategy and onboarding. How do you do that more quickly?
So you're going to focus primarily to begin with on pulling your operations apart and putting them back together in a productized manner for Google Ads to begin with.
Correct.
And you're going to and you're going to do the same once you've got that dialed in. You're then going to bring the next service offering in, which will be SEO. And I know that we've spoken at length about web design, and that for any agency can be an absolute nightmare. Maybe talk a little bit about how you've solved or how you intend to solve or productize SEO, as well as eliminating the web design component completely, because I know, as far as I understand it, you're going to implement what I've been talking about or teaching now for quite a bit of time.
Definitely, yeah. So we already have something, we call it Client Convert, which is a productized performance legal template that we've designed and created ourselves. So for me, we've kind of thought about how we can deploy that very, very quickly to a particular customer. So I think that there's a copywriting component to that to some degree. Then there's how do you structure that on your landing page or your website, for example, and how do you deploy that very quickly? So we're actually looking around having, say, we've got this pre-cut template already, but getting to the point where it's like a zero code installation. We don't want to be coding at all. We don't want to spend time coding. But there's always some variations in terms of the content. So we're looking at copywriting, and the copywriting will write towards a fixed number of panels. So there might be like 30 panels. It might have a testimonial panel, a hero panel, a services panel, basically different panels that make up that site. So the copy and the text we create has to fit those panels. From a design perspective, all the things that are going to change are, I guess, the panels on a page, the colors, the logo, very simplified elements like that. And then from a deployment perspective, all of this stuff is included within Client Convert already. So all the panels exist. We should be able to get it to a point where data entry is like a $5 job, basically. We just need this text to be added into these panels, and then we're going to launch the site, And again, with data entry, if you can get to the point where you could do it, say, at $5 per hour, then you could easily have a roster over 48-hour period to say, like, here, you're working this particular 8 hours, you're working this next 8 hours, you're working this next 8 hours. Let's deploy it so quickly and get all this content into this site as fast as possible. Some sites are very simple. They're only like 6 pages. Other, for us, like lawyer sites, could be 50 to 100 pages, So we're looking at that, saying, how do we collapse that down, especially from an SEO degree? So you can't use a landing page. We have to use the actual website. But speaking to customers, I've just been explaining it as that whole race car analogy. We don't want to be pulling your website off into the pits and fixing it and constantly fixing things, because even if you feel that's going to save you money for now in redoing this website, it's going to cost you far more in the long run to do that. So obviously conveying that point and having the process in place to deploy it very quickly. And then I think from an SEO perspective, as I said, I would actually like to have pages pre-written and ready to go. Even blog posts. I'd love to have 100 blog posts pre-written and ready to go. And I'd love to have 100 service pages, for example, pre-written and ready to go. And then all we do is figure out how do we now rewrite this content. And we're actually seeing with like AI as well, like AI is very clever. AI is able to do some of that hard lifting to some degree as well, you know, where you may be able to use components of AI to rewrite pages quickly. And then again, you might just need somebody with, you know, some process to make sure that it's not gibberish. It actually makes sense when you're deploying it, you know?
Yeah. I think
so yeah.
just to clarify for the listeners, in case they're a little bit confused by what Byron is suggesting here, we're talking about replacing, not repairing. And using the race car analogy, which you shared with me some time ago, which I thought was brilliant, you said, I want to spend the first 20 laps of the race out there on the track competing. I don't want to spend the first 20 laps of the race in the pits fixing the car. And I thought, wow, that makes so much sense. And that is fairly typical for the way in which most SEO campaigns work. An SEO consultant or agency might waste the first 3 to 6 months, depending upon the size of the site, of course, fixing the website. And I know I've spoken with a lot of SEO consultants about this, and they all agree, wait a minute, yeah, you're right. We do. We spend all this time mucking around trying to fix a broken website just to get it to a point where it might start performing. And the solution to that is just use pre-built templates, web templates. Now, you can only do that, of course, if you niche down like you're doing. Like you know exactly who you're targeting, and you can build these things out and work towards replacing, not repairing. And this is a topic of conversation we've had a number of times now, and you've taken it even further than I know when we first spoke about it. I said, stop thinking about it like traditional web design. Start thinking about it like software. You know, just go and install the damn thing. Don't muck around trying to build out this custom thing that's going to take forever.
Correct.
So, yeah, the whole client convert thing, I really like that. And ideally, you want to get it to a position, and I'm sure you will over time, where you've built out a library of web templates. You know, you can do the same with building out a library of, you know, content, and you can do the same with building out a library or a resource rather of sites that, you know, you can get links from quickly. And it's all about, you know, it's all about the power of speed, right? You want to work with speed so that you can get yourself into a position where you can offer a guarantee. Hey, if we don't double your revenue within the next 12 months, you can have your money back. And eliminating that web design component, I think, like the way in which you intend doing it, I think makes the most amount of sense.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you want to be in control. And that's the control part's always been one of the more challenging areas of SEO, because you're not necessarily in full control of everything, you know. But the more points of control you have, then I think the more easily you can then factor in a time and a certain result within in a specific time period. So what you said there about software and so forth, I actually look at the business now like it's software all the time. Like I look at it like it's a SaaS-based business. And again, with things like Client Convert, I want to get it to the point where there's, say, 30 panels that we can use. You mentioned there about having 3 different template sites or whatever. There's a fixed a degree of content and panels and the way that you can structure that site. And designers, they can't just add in a new section. You can't add that in. It's not in the software yet. We can't add it in. So the only way we can get a new panel in there is if it's actually approved and we say, cool, we had 30 panels, here's 31, or we've removed one panel and we've put in another one. Because again, if you're adding in panels on the fly, that's more coding, that's more design, that's a whole lot of issues there again. So again, like everything in business should be looked at it like software. It's a fixed set of functionality that you're giving for a client to produce a desired result.
Yeah, so, and this is exactly what you're doing with Google Ads, right? And we had this conversation just the other day. You said, when I'm pushing ads at a site, the outcome is unknown, because even though you do quality work and you're working with a level of confidence and you do get results, pushing, not having that control over the outcome because you're pushing ads to a broken website, let's say, that introduces problems. But If
Yep.
you're ignoring the site, that may be not the best way to word it, but
Mm.
if you're providing those landing pages, you've got
Mm.
control. You've got control over the ads. You've got control over the landing pages. You've got control over everything, and that gives you more confidence around the outcome, which is exactly where you want to be. You're not working,
Correct.
you know, we're not quite sure how this is going to turn out, and
Mm.
fumbling our way through, and the whole process takes, you know, 3 or 4 times longer than it should.
Correct. And I think with that as well, like you want to get to the point with your landing pages. I said to my team the other day, I said, how do you know that this landing page here is a high converting landing page? It was one that we designed, but I said, how do you know that that's a high converting landing page? Oh, well, we don't really know. We've used it. We've used it before and it got like a decent conversion rate on it. I said, but is that the best conversion rate that we could get from it? And I think like the more repeatable some of this is, the more you use it, you can actually get to the point where you say like, you know, we've split tested this consistently.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we've split tested, we've tried different copy. Because I'll give you the example of a lawyer website. Some of them speak in very, you know, it's full legal jargon. Is legal jargon the best way to entice someone to be a prospect for you? Probably not, because I don't really understand all the terms, and it's just resulted in overwhelm for me here, you know? So we really want to look at it and say, well, what is the best things to be putting on this page, and driving that? And really, once we know that in detail, if a customer says, well, I want to add this kind of copy, I say, well, I wouldn't do that, or I'm not going to do that, because that's going to move away from our process here of knowing what a high converting page is, you know? So
Yeah. Well, you do the same with your landing pages and your pre-built web templates. You're constantly
correct.
revising them so that you know, okay, this thing's, you know,
Correct.
heat map tracking and tracking everything else. Okay,
Correct.
this thing's converting at 3%. Let's go back to our little test environment here, our templates, and let's make some improvements here, and let's be constantly revising these things so that we can get them to 10, 15, 20%.
Correct.
This is a conversation I had with one of the members last night. It's much, much easier to double a conversion rate. You can do that in minutes, as opposed to trying to double the amount of traffic a site's getting. That can take months.
And the funny thing is, right, if you do it for one customer, why wouldn't you do it for the other 10?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it just goes on in terms of
the
how
benefits of niching down. Yeah.
100%.
All right, Byron. Well, yeah, thanks so much for your time. I know this has been a bit of a long call, but I think we've covered some really solid points, and hopefully the listeners have gotten a lot of value out of this.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if they're looking for? You obviously specialize in legal SEO. Maybe share with the listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you can find me on pixelrush.com.au. That's our agency website. But again, I'm in the forums. You'll see some of my posts within your forums, John. So if anybody wants to reach out and ask me a few questions, feel free to do so. And I'm sure that I'll be responding to anybody within the forums at specific times. So happy to help wherever I can.
All right, cool. Thanks, dude.
Cool.
Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more, head over to bringtheseo.com. We provide business development training for SEO consultants wanting to improve their processes, increase profits, and scale to $100,000 a month or more without all the stress and overwhelm.